Okay, I will be starting the webinar. Hello, everybody, and warm welcome to this meeting on how to integrate child protection into curricula and training. When we'll be launching today the core competencies framework for tourism educational professionals. I see people are coming in. It will take a few seconds. So let's wait for everybody joining. I see attendees are coming up. And I will start this meeting in a few seconds. So we have already quite a few panelists. People are joining us from different parts of the world, and that's also why we are organizing it at this time in the afternoon in Bangkok to allow people coming from the US, from Europe, Asia, and also Australia joining us. And I see more and more people are coming in. So let's give just a few more seconds and then we'll open this webinar. So for everybody joining, you can use the Q&A to ask any questions to the panelists. And you can also use chat, as some of you are already doing. As we see also, we have participants from Caribbean joining us. This is really amazing, people coming from all parts of the world. Okay, I think with this, we can now start this webinar. So again, a warm welcome to everybody joining us from different time zones. I'm Gabriela Kuhn. I'm head of program on child protection in travel and tourism at ECPAT International, and I have a big pleasure of moderating this event today. We are here with the representatives of tourism educational schools, universities, organizations, and importantly, we will also have contributions from the Office of the UN Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children. And altogether, we are here to launch the core competencies framework for tourism educational professionals so they can integrate child protection into training and curricula. So I will hand over now to Guillaume Landry, who is the Executive Director of ECPAT International, and who will explain why and how ECPAT engaged tourism educational experts to develop core competencies. After which, Manus Debarra, child protection specialist from the Office of the UN Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children, will reflect on the key role that the tourism educational organizations have in preparing students to become part of child protection system. So I'm handing it over now to Guillaume.
Thank you, Gabriela, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the many of you coming from across different continents to this exciting, in our view, exciting discussion, conversation about a piece of work that in itself can appear a bit dry, right? A framework, well, something you can put on a shelf and move on. But no, this is a piece that can really influence the way we can be better, because this is not a new subject matter, right? It's been 25 years that ECPAT has been privileged to lead movements to challenge the way travel and tourism can be framed so that it's safe for children. And of course, the way we traveled 25 years ago compared to today have changed. And I'm sure you can imagine different aspects of how tourism keeps evolving. So people are looking for more localized experience. They go in remote places where people didn't go before. They travel with purpose. We hear a lot about orphanage tourism, as much as people going with missionary purposes. They go in humanitarian work. They visit school. They want to contribute in facilitating the teaching of a language or sport. And this special rapporteur on the sale of children has issued a dedicated report to look at voluntarism, for instance, and warn people that in itself, volunteering is a very positive experience. It gives purpose to your travel. But there are very clear risks that children can be transformed as tourism destination or featured, and that's wrong. So how are we taking care of those phenomena? How are we taking care of platforms where people make direct reservations and go more remotely in places outside of the radar where they can misuse those opportunities to get in touch with children and exploit them, and many other phenomena. Also, the industry in itself is changing. It's booming. Destinations, or basically every country in the world, is home to millions of people coming and going because of pilgrimage festivals, or visiting because of the summer holidays. So it's not just about tourism, it's also travel, business people that comes into places, the transport industry, and so forth. A lot of the work that the civil society movement, United Nations, different agencies, universities have done has really targeted the professionals that works in the hospitality industry, that work on cruising companies, that work at airport, in airline companies, in buses and train station, and so forth. Let's be clear, this word is essential. But the step that we try to examine, and at some point, how can we be a little bit more sustainable? How can we look at all of those usually young workforce that is eager to enter the market and play different functions in tourism professional academies or schools around the world? How can we embed a space for them to be introduced to child protection, to be clear on what they should be doing, what they should not be doing, that will make a difference in the industry, whatever role they play, wherever they will be working. And so that's an opportunity, because if you frame this and embed this in the curriculum, it means all the students every year will see that training. And the second question is it just an awareness raising when we put the alarm and scare people about the risks? Or is it actually an opportunity to equip people with the do's and don'ts? What are we actually asking people to do? So it was a space to think at those two elements: sustainability, embedding a change in the way we could work more at the upfront, the level of the tourism academies. And the second aspect, when we have an opportunity to teach, how are we going to measure success? What is the change we want to generate? And that's with the skill-based approach. So today we'll hear about the details of that result. It's been extremely exciting, thanks to UBS Optimus Foundation, to be able to work with a number of experts, and especially through them with young people as well, who were able to give opinion, advice, and making sure that this is not an abstract process. It speaks to them. This is something they can relate. It would be useful to them. This is something they would respond to. And so that's the objective that we've been working with in the recent 2 years, basically. And on this, we have several people who will be able to speak about the perspective and value of that process. But let me hand over to Chief Defender of the child protection sector and the interlinkages between normative approach and practices. So very glad that you're with us, Manus, to give your perspective as well on this important work.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. Thank you, Gabriella. And it's a pleasure to join this very important conversation today. The first thing is, of course, to acknowledge the enormous work and leadership of ECPAT over indeed 25 years, as Guillaume mentioned, really being pioneers in this space and moving conversation, reflection, and action forward, most importantly. So just to thank you for that. It's a pleasure to share some reflections from the perspective of the Office of the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General on Violence Against Children on this important topic of embedding child protection in the travel tourism sector. Just to give some context for participants, in 2023, the special representative devoted her annual report to the General Assembly of the United Nations specifically on this topic, a piece of work we had the pleasure to work with ECPAT on also. And the question one might ask is, well, why? Why at that moment was this an important priority for the special representative? And the reason was, she observed that she is someone who has worked for many years on the issue of child protection in travel and tourism, but she observed that after the pandemic, as the sector was being rethought, after it was getting back on its feet, there was really a very urgent need to make sure that when you're rethinking travel and tourism, and when you're building back better, to use a phrase that has fallen out of usage now, but at the time was still quite current, where is child protection and all of that? So, our work, for example, at the UN is framed by the Sustainable Development Goals, which of course are very relevant for tourism, both in the sense that the tourism sector can be an important engine for development, but also it makes this important contribution. And her point was, well, yes, sustainability is important. It means being green. It means that you are being inclusive. It means that you are respecting local cultures and traditions, but it also means making sure that it is safe. And including that idea of safety, as Guillaume has already alluded to, as a key part of what it means to be sustainable, was an important message that the special representative in our office was trying to push. And to really frame that as part of what it means also to move ahead the global sustainable development agenda, because you cannot achieve sustainable development for as long as violence against children, exploitation of children persists. And so that was the reason that our office was very keen to focus on that. And I thought I would just share some of the key messages from that work. And that one, of course, is that, with mobility, which, as I've mentioned, and as Guillaume has mentioned, and as you all know better than I, the sector can be and is an enormous engine for development and brings enormous benefits to communities. But of course, we know the infrastructure of travel and tourism is misused. It is misused for the purposes of the sexual exploitation of children, for labor exploitation, for child trafficking. And a recent report highlighted from the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, and indeed one of our own reports, unfortunately, the proportion of detected trafficking victims who are children has increased. So the problem is there. And as Guillaume already very eloquently set out also, the industry is changing. Issues of digitalization have changed the landscape. Issues of community tourism, voluntourism have changed the landscape. So as we are rethinking and incorporating child protection as part of our work, that this evolution and how that has an effect on child protection challenges or responses must also be borne in mind. But the messaging and the advocacy of our office also focused on the fact that there is a solid foundation to build on. And I was very pleased to see in the core competencies framework, of course, many of these really important milestones are included and are mentioned there. We have the code, which of course, again, ECPAT has a leading role on. There are UN guiding principles on business and human rights. What does it mean to incorporate a human rights perspective into your value chain? How do you assess what are the human rights risks or implications of what you're doing and how to mitigate them? And of course, there are lots of different stakeholders and actors here, and everyone has to do their particular part in ensuring this puzzle is put together. And I think that's important context for the discussion today as well, that there is this joint effort underway. States, of course, have their role in terms of legislation, regulation, requiring due diligence, etc., to make sure that children are safe, including in the context of travel and tourism. Industry also has a leading role, and I know that will be an important part of the discussion today, but also industry, not including just those directly involved in travel and tourism, but, ICT online platforms that may be involved, financial sector may be involved. And again, ECPAT has led pioneering work on that. And of course, civil society partners, ECPAT and others are part of this ecosystem. And so which brings me, of course, to the focus for today around professionals working in this sector. This is part of that larger ecosystem This is part of that larger chain that needs to be in place for children to be kept safe. And I appreciated very much the core competencies framework and the very clear way it went through, as Guillaume was saying, what are the do's and don'ts. It's, you know, of course, making professionals aware is an important prerequisite, but it is not simply an awareness raising exercise, right? It is also the bit around assessing the risks, mitigating the risks, knowing where to go when something goes wrong, collaborating and being aware of who else is there. But an important point to make here also, and one that certainly in my professional life I've made very often, is this is not about turning everyone into in-depth child protection experts who are going to be investigating serious cases. That's not, you know, whether in this context or if we're doing child rights or child protection training with teachers or other professionals. The point there is to be aware, to have the do's and don'ts, to have the ability to know whom to send something to, whom to ask. It's not to take on this burden, or it can sometimes feel, I think, for professionals a little bit perhaps overwhelming, you know, because you have so many other things you need to be doing. But the point is that, you know, with the kind of empowerment that we have here in the core competencies framework and the kind of support it envisages, it is precisely, you know, with respect to your particular role, what are the do's and don'ts, and not trying to turn you into investigators or, you know, people with child protection expertise. That's not the objective. It's, again, to be part of that chain, to be made aware and to be empowered to do what needs to be done within your professional areas of responsibility to ensure that as part of that ecosystem, children can be kept safe from harm. So I'll leave it there. Look forward very much to the conversation and engaging with all of you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Manus. We very much value your partnership, and thank you so much for this introduction that actually leads us very well to the panel, where we'll be exactly discussing with teachers and with experts in tourism sector how this topic can be integrated and can be part of the curricula trainings with school, and how they can be part of this ecosystem. So thank you so much for that. And with this, I will now start with the panel discussion. We will have 3 questions with panelists from Australia, Cambodia, India, Norway, United Kingdom, and USA. And after that panel, we'll also open time for Q&A from all the participants. So if you have any questions, you can ask them in a Q&A box, or also you can raise your hand later. So with this, let me start with our first panelist. And I'm so happy that we have with us Asa Grahn, who is Associate Professor at the Norwegian School of Hotel Management from the University of Stavanger in Norway, and Anne Han, who is Hospitality Teacher from École Hôtelière de Tourisme Paul de Brule de Cambodia. And it's great to have you with us, because the topic of child protection has not been traditionally seen as part of the education, and very few schools actually integrate already this topic, but you did in your experiences. So we would like to hear from you. Why do you think it's important to prepare students to understand the specific role that they should play in child protection system, also as Manus introduced it to us? And because you already worked on this topic, what do you see this core competencies framework, what added value it has to the work that you've been already doing? So I'll hand over now to Asa, and after that to Anhan.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. And thank you very much for allowing me to come and present and take part of this and present a little bit of the work we've been doing for the last 8 years, actually, I think, with ECPAT Norway. So finally, something bigger is happening, and you feel, a community of common interests here. Anyway, yes, I think it's, as you said, why this is important. It's very important for me, or for us, to prepare those students to understand pretty much of what Manus has said as well, their specific role they can have in society and within their professional when it comes to child protection. And this, our sector, as you know, obviously intersects with a lot of people, obviously vulnerable populations, as also Guillaume have said today. And whether you then work in hospitality, event planning, travel management, those professionals will inevitably encounter situations where their actions, or as I used to say, their inactions, can directly impact children's well-being. So I mean, it's our duty to ensure that future tourism professionals recognizes these responsibilities and become equipped to act ethically and thereby being able to prevent harm. And as said, the industry operates in diverse contexts, and I mean, it's very, very critical to work on these responsibilities that those professionals can have. And our students must understand that every tourism actor plays a role in preventing exploitation and safeguarding children's rights. So by embedding this understanding early on, as we do in the bachelor program, we gradually build, I think, a cultural responsibility that maybe goes beyond this generic regular core that you might learn in a tourism program. And of course, this would create awareness across the industry eventually, but then hopefully also that they will be able, as you have mentioned, to take action. But we need to start somewhere, and I think we've done a decent work throughout the 8 years we have done. So over to the added value, and what I think and why I think this has been interesting and very important that we've been part of now, putting together this core competencies framework. I think this work has been really substantial. It's a framework that I think provides a clear and consistent kind of manual or baseline that can be incorporated into our curricula or into any curricula, but also easier to share it across other educational institutions. It's kind of easier for us as well to ensure that students will graduate with a comprehensive understanding of their duties, but also with the practical steps in this case that they actually can take. We can present, we can work on this together, but then they also have something more handy that they can actually go back to and inform themselves and their colleagues, etc., depending on where they will end up. So I think this resource will help us strengthen our teaching approach, but also reinforce the message that child protection is, in my eyes, not optional. It's an integral part of sustainable and responsible tourism practices. We cannot have sustainable tourism if we do not embed this in our work. At my university, it's easy to say we are forced to add sustainability in our curriculums, and that's it. Nobody tells us what that could be. What is sustainability? What is the sustainable development goals? That's all they are interested in knowing that we do, and then it's up to us to add whatever. And one little more thing I would like that I think is worth noting is that within our institution, which I'm very proud of, we have 3 different programs. But currently, it's only the tourism program where I work, where I'm part of right now, that has incorporated child protection education. For example, the hotel management program that goes hotel tourism, and then we have a generic service management. They have not yet included this critical topic, no matter how much I try, So at this point, I think a lot of this has been driven by my personal commitment and interest, that I give to my students. So I hope that this new framework will help us advocate for broader implementation and kind of put pressure on management to integrate child protection education across all our programs, which will then ensuring more of a unified and consistent approach to this issue and also to sustainability in general. That's really my hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asa. And indeed, your commitment is so strong. And thank you for being in this movement with us. But that's what we need. It needs to go beyond personal commitment and beyond the leaders that are here with us. So I'm handing over now to Anhan to also speak on why this is important and what is the added value of this framework, considering that you already worked on this topic. Over to you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gabriela. Good evening from Cambodia. My name is Han, hospitality teacher. I work in Eco Hotellerie the Tourist Paul de Brul. So it is the hospitality and tourism school. The founder is Mr. Paul de Brul. He's the co-founder of Accor Group Hotel. It is an NGO school. We have been running for 20 years. Yeah, but firstly, before I start answer this question, firstly, thank you to Ms. Gabriela, Mr. Guillaume, and ECPAT International for inviting me to join the workshop in Vienna, and of course joining this launch core competency integrate of child protection in curriculums. I'm very happy to be here. Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, it really adds value to the curriculums in schools. It's good to have this program in our training programs. Our school actually we just have 1 year program, so the student just join us for 1 year, and then they will go to work in the hotel, in airports, in travel agency. So it's just 1 year program. In fact, Paul de Brul School, we use our ASEAN tourist curriculums, which we already have our own child protection module. But this child protection, it's more like general knowledge. It just provide us some link or some resource on the website. So before ECPATs joining the ECPAT and suggestion from the expert from the ECPATs, we just provide like some link for our student. They just go on internet to learn this and that, so it's more general. But after joining the workshop and the suggestion from the experts from the experts, so I can create my course outline very clear. So like as our program, it really just like 1 year program, it really short. So we just focus on like 3 main elements, so to make sure that our student can like they can catch easily. So the first elements like identify the issue of sexual exploitation of children, and the second one describe the action to prevent, and the third element just the actions to implement at workplace. So meaning that our student, after they graduate from the school, they go to work in the hotel, at the airports, in the travel agency or restaurant or whatever, they be able to learn some activity that really related to the like child abuse, or some activity that they can refer this to the manager or to any local authority. So it is important that our student they learn something, but it is very clear. I can say now we have a clear and concise way to deliver to our students, so they can because the program is short, so it's easy for them to catch and to implement at workplace. And after this also I can say all our main teacher who teach this module, they're more confident, because after returning from Vietnam, I see all what I have done and resource and I designed the course to the teacher, so now they clear, they can deliver effectively, not like before we just let the student go to the link and summarize and because also our student, they just finished grade 12, but the level of the people, because we are the NGO, so the student from the rural area, so their knowledge is really hard for them to understand all those links. But of course, it is important, just give them the link in case they are free, they can learn, but mainly we just focus on these three. And also we are ready because our school, we provide some short course training. So child protection is one of the module, one of the short the course that we can help our partner or community that they contact our school to conduct the training at their place, because we used to do like customer service or whatever, but for child protection now I can say we are confident. And lastly, it really add value to the learning program, because child protection, it really something that happen a lot, really a lot in travel and tourism. I integrate child protections into the training program, and yes, I can say that we work together to protect our child, and our children will grow up in the safe environment. So this core competency is really important to the school, that they provide the professional attitude, skill, knowledge about this to the students. Yeah, I think that's all from my side, and we'll wait for the question later.
Thank you so much, and that's great, and it's so good to hear that it helps your teachers to be more confident in developing the curricula, the trainings, and that you are finding it useful. And an important element when we were developing this core competencies framework with you and with other experts in tourism sector was to make sure that it actually relates with the students themselves, that it's fit for purpose and it responds to students' expectations. So I will now move to the second panel where I will invite Jessica Wickey-Bird, and who is the executive director at the Center of the Study for Human Trafficking and Modern Slavery, and a lecturer at the University of Central Florida and Rosen College of Hospitality and Management in the USA, who was with us also at that workshop. We also have with us Ryan Nolan, who is the lecturer and researcher at Sheffield Business School in the UK, and Aditi Chuthai. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing well the second name. I hope I'm quite correct, who is the assistant professor and at the Indian Institute of Tourism and Travel Management in India. So we have people joining us from all over the regions. And we are so grateful to you, because once we developed the framework, we could test it, whether it actually speaks to students' expectations and their needs. So you conducted the focus groups with the students, and I would like to hear from you how it resonates with your students as future professionals. And what were the key messages from the students, which we reflected them in the core competencies framework. So we would like to hear from you and from your students with whom you worked. Over to you, Jessica.
Hi, Gabriella. Thank you so much, and thanks for inviting me. And it's so good to see all of you, my fellow abolitionists that we all got together last October already. And so it's so good to see all your faces. And so one of my students just popped on. I saw the chat. So hi, Frankie. Thanks for joining us. He was part of the focus group. And so to start out, I want to talk a little bit about why this in particular curriculum and training is really important. I work with a lot of survivors and lived experience experts here when I work with them on our anti-trafficking efforts here in Central Florida in the US. And a lot of them tell me that they didn't realize that they were trafficked that they just thought that's kind of what life was. And until later on in life, they realized that what they had went through had been trafficking. So education on every level, age appropriate through all of the grammar schools, middle schools, high schools, and then into collegiate is really important, because the more that we train, the more that people learn. And so I'm so glad that we're doing this, especially for tourism professionals. So I had the honor to host the student focus group with my student group called Knights of the Realm. These are students that are work with me at the Center for the Study of Human Trafficking and Modern Slavery, and they advance all anti-trafficking efforts. So I invited them and some other students to come in, and their feedback was quite inspiring. And so I wanted to give you just a bit of a background and then some of the statements, if you don't mind. So I have some notes here. I'm going to go ahead. So throughout this, when I was mentoring and teaching students about human trafficking and focus groups, it provided us an engaging and impactful way for them to foster awareness, really use their critical thinking and then advocacy. And so in this particular setting, they got to explore the complexities of human trafficking by discussing them, analyzing the policies, maybe some prevention strategies. And through these guided discussions, the students developed a deeper understanding of the social, economic, and legal factors that influence trafficking. This type of learning in a focus group, it really creates a safe space for students to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and collaborate on solutions. So this hands-on learning approach empowers these future leaders to become informed advocates and take meaningful action in their communities after college or after their vocational training. So what we want to do is try to include teaching to be a servant leader, to care for your communities. And so this framework, that core competencies frameworks, it created the knowledge and experiential learning that helped to make it real. So student feedback was to use experiential style learning to teach difficult or alarming topics and social justice issues such as human trafficking. So they said to us, this is a really tough topic. I can't really sit in a room and with somebody speaking at me for an hour and 15 minutes and absorb the information. We really need some sort of simulation style or role playing style or something that will engage us so that we're using all of our adult learning faculties, right? So if you see something, you remember 10%. You see something and hear something, you remember 20%, and so on, to where the experiential style learning students or participants will learn and remember like 85% or more of what happened. So with these really challenging topics, I would mentor other teachers, other faculty, other leaders and mentors to use a simulation style, focus group style, role play, some sort of experiential style in teaching these really tough topics. Okay, so start out with that. And so using the simulation style teaching, it really did provide a hands-on immersive experience, bridging theory and real world application. We did a simulation style last summer on trafficking in a different area. Some of the feedback from the students when I asked them about these core competencies was to definitely include this simulation into your teaching. We included actually one of the comments from my student in the core competencies PDF brochure, which looks fantastic, by the way. Good job, guys. And it was that when there's really tough topics, it's hard to focus on it. It's hard to keep your brain engaged, and you almost clock out and put a wall up because the content is so heavy. And so by being engrossed in it, where you're doing other things and it's a simulation style, you can then focus on everything and not just the trafficking issue. And so, and I'll kind of explain that in just one second. So by utilizing this simulation style, it bridges theory where it meets the real world application. So realistic scenarios, it again helps to develop critical thinking, problem solving, decision making skills in a safe environment. It really improves knowledge retention and fosters collaboration. And so this is a really, really great opportunity to include in your core competencies, in your training, this style of this teaching pedagogy or methodology. And then lastly, I'd like to end with, so the students were very forthright in understanding that child protective education training is imperative in any kind of hospitality and tourism training that is involving human trafficking, child sex trafficking, child sex tourism. And this is really important no matter if it's from the United States, Asia, Europe, Australia, Africa. It doesn't matter where you are, that they all agree you must include this training into the curriculum. And it needs to be really start regionally, because every region looks a little bit different, and then go to regionally, nationally, internationally, and so on. But it's very important. Every one of them agreed. To take it a step further, you really want the students who are going through this training to not just be proficient in understanding what the identifying factors are to look for in human trafficking. You want the students to have a servant leadership heart. Like I said a minute ago, they have to really, when they see something, they're going to say something. They're not going to be swayed by traffickers coming in with the big shiny things and saying, look the other way, look the other way. We really want to instill in our education the importance of serving your communities and making sure you see something, you say something. So this collaboration number 6, competency number 6 in the core competencies framework, collaboration is going to be one of the biggest key points in this training. It's very important in the core competency framework. Collaboration allows for the greater purpose by bringing together diverse perspectives, skills, and resources to achieve meaningful and lasting impact. Okay, so when they have collaboration, they know who to call, right? So included in your framework, when you're educating your students in your community, who do they call? What is the proper procedures to report trafficking? What happens after you call? What are the steps for that? What are the outcomes? And then know your local police station, know your local trauma-informed resource for survivors, know your local advocacies, local policies. All of these things will come together, and by having a really strong collaborative system-wide approach in your community and in your teaching, you're just going to then really foster an environment where the students can then advance taking their teaching from their framework and executing it into society as active solutions. So that's kind of all of my advice and from what I took from my students, and it was really fun to hear their perspectives. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And it's also so great to see Frankie joining this webinar. And indeed, I mean, their voices are critical, and they did inform core competencies. The quotes are included there. And thank you so much. I'll hand over now to Ryan Nolan, as you also worked with your students.
Thanks, Gabrielle, and thank you, TechPat. Thank you to Gabriella and Guillaume for pulling this together. Not just this, but the workshop. I think you've done a fantastic job bringing everybody together and pushing this forward. And I'd like to say, I've worked with ECPAT for 10 years, and the landscape has changed considerably in those 10 years, particularly post-COVID. Not only in what we're dealing with, the topic child trafficking, but also, in terms of how we deal with that situation, how we deliver this education, this awareness raising. And in that respect, I'll agree with much of what Jessica's just had to say. Particularly, I think the key point that Jessica mentioned, experiential learning. I think that's one thing that's come through previously and has come through from my focus group findings. I've got to say thank you to my colleague, Dr. Therese Winter, for pulling together a group of students from tourism, hospitality, events, and aviation for the focus group. She did a great job to help out there. And I think what we did find there was that there was a very big difference. I mentioned working with ECPAT for 10 years. Previously, we delivered academic sessions with professionals in the field. So law enforcement, child safeguarding professionals, but also from an international hotel chain. And that made the impact. Very much of what Jessica was saying, it created the atmosphere where the students could listen to people who work on the front line, who encounter these situations and deal with children. Post-COVID, that hasn't happened. So we're just starting to build up that situation again. But one thing I think this framework has provided us with is a tool to move forward, to look at this in a consistent and unified manner across the world. Yeah, and I think what we did in the workshop exemplified that. We came together, we found commonalities and common ways of dealing with this. And I think we can impart that to those future professionals. And when we conducted the focus groups, we took I guess I'm not sure if everybody's aware of Kolb's reflective analysis. So, what worked well, why did it work well, what didn't work well, why not, and what would you do differently in the future? So we were asking the students what they thought of the competency framework. We introduced the context, the phenomenon of child exploitation, child sexual exploitation in tourism and abroad. And the students grasped it. I was very pleased to see across the board, as Jessica said, the students grasped the importance of this, and what the impact was upon lives and harm that was caused, but also to the business context. But there were some very interesting findings. The students' concerns revolved around grasping the context, being able to understand, well, we know this is important, we know where we can help in some way, but how does that fit in with us and what we do? I conducted a focus group, as I said, with my colleague Therese Winter, and we looked at it more from observing about the implications for delivery of this topic and how we get that across to students and their learning environment. And what was interesting within the group was that there were undergraduates and postgraduates and students from different sectors. And there was a slight difference. The undergraduates were contextualizing this very much at an operational level. So how do I encounter this on a check-in desk? How might this present at the airport or at an event or at a hotel? Whereas the postgraduate students were thinking more about management of this situation. So it's not an unsurprising finding, but I think it has implications for us in terms of what we deliver at what level and how we can fit that in with our programs. And particularly, I guess, from an institutional point of view, how we can meet AACSB accreditation criteria, what our institutions require of us within the programs, so that we can show a progress from second years to third years to postgraduate. And I think that's what the framework gives us, is the opportunity to do that. And that's one of the things that we noticed when we were looking at the framework and using it within the focus group. What really helped is when the postgraduates started thinking about that as a management tool. What does this mean for me as a manager? So I'll have a team of people. I may need to influence policy. So it actually helped us by talking to the postgrad in this way, or talking about it as the management implications. It helped the undergraduates see where they were going. It helped them, think about, well, this is my future career. What will I need when I graduate, when I go into the industry? And I think it also helped enthuse them in some way to say, well, you are management students. Hopefully, in the future, you will be managers in this field. You will have teams of people. You will influence corporations, institutions, and maybe policy. But it was still difficult, I think, for many students to understand how they might encounter these situations. So one of the questions that we posed to students was we asked them to get in smaller groups. We broke it down and asked them to think about how they may encounter in their own futures or in their work, how they might encounter this situation. What might they see? What might they think? What might they feel? And this really did help the students visualize, their role and what they could do, and it helped them feel, what would happen, a situation. And I think more than anything else, what did really help was one of the students through this process realized, well, actually, I think I've already encountered this situation. And she described working part-time on her own in a hotel on reception one night when somebody came in with a very young person. And so that because it was the student giving the example, because the student was using the language that the other students would use, it made it very different to an academic delivering the topic. And so I think that helped the other students contextualize for themselves. Oh, actually, yeah, this may happen to me. This is real. And that then made me think about some of the examples I had from my previous work with the United Kingdom Human Trafficking Centre and some of the actual scenarios that I'd encountered. And so I think one of the things that came out there was this importance, as Jessica says, of giving a real life scenario that we're talking about people, we're talking about children, that this is not an academic subject, this is something that harms children. And that we're not asking people to be police officers or law enforcement, but looking at what we can do. What can we do to help it prevent it in the first place, rather than actually dealing with it afterwards? But if it does, then what does that mean? That raised two. I think I sent through, Gabrielle, the feedback from the students, and that raised two interesting points. A lot of the students mentioned storytelling and scenarios that would really help them in terms of grasping the topic and grounding it in reality for them and what that would mean. But also the idea of being confident in their own decision making, recognizing a situation. And obviously that requires a change in mindset. And I think this is where we can fit in with our institutional requirements that Jessica mentioned leadership. So we can bring it into that leadership. We can bring it into managing the scenario through that role playing. Definitely, the idea of, well, is it this situation? Is that situation? Do we pass it on to the professionals? And for the students, I think this was really useful to say you can do something. You are undergraduates, you are postgraduates, you will be professionals in this field. And I think that's where the enthusiasm came in, because they could then visualize their own professional development. And that perhaps takes us into the point of really how we get this accepted within our institutions. I'm not sure about my colleagues present who work in other universities, but I found it very difficult working in the business school to get this topic. I think Asa mentioned at the very beginning about getting this accepted in other programs. The big feedback I have from let's say senior managers is that, well, that should be in criminology. What's that got to do with business? And should it be here? Do we want to really, put this on our students? And once they understand the situation and see how this can happen and the difference we can make, but also how it fits in with, we've mentioned corporate social responsibility, policies, things of that nature. In our industry, we're already looking at safety and security. It can be incorporated in that way. So the institution were more willing to accept this topic, where I integrate it into. We've got a module for professional development. We've got a module on contemporary challenges in society. Using words like sexual exploitation made them think, oh, hang on, I'm not sure if we can deal with that. But I guess one of the final points was that one of the things that I grasped from the focus group was understanding when we're delivering, we have a very large international student cohort. And what I learned was that you have to understand the terminology you're using, that for different cultures, they understand things in different ways. Exploitation may mean one thing in the UK, but something completely different, in another country. Child, the idea of what is a child, what constitutes a child. We took a step back in the focus group and looked at the definitions of a child according to the United Nations, which really helped in terms of looking at those competencies, the knowledge categories. That's a really good baseline using the United Nations, information that's already available and out there, those definitions, those frameworks. I think really help the students sort of pull it all together. So I think what I would say to finish this off is that I don't think we need to convince the students that this is an important topic. Once they see it, once they understand it more, then they're enthused to do something about it. They want to do something about it. What we're doing with this framework, I think, shows educators, well, we can help them do something about it. Yeah, we can maybe help them change the future. So that's my wish, and I think that's the final point.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ray. That's great to hear all these ways in which the students really grasp it and how we need to adapt it. And in fact, the suggestions from your students about scenarios, role playing, that's exactly what we also included in the core competencies framework, and how this can be adapted and accepted. That's what we'll be looking also in the discussion in the third panel. But before we move to that, I'll hand over to Aditi, because you work with your students in India. So we have a third region. So let's hear. You also mentioned, Ray, the differences of regions, cultures. So let's hear now from you, Aditi, from India. What did your students tell you, and how did it resonate with them?
Yes. Good evening, everyone, and namaskar. I'm audible, Gabriela.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I must compliment the team of experts for introducing such important issue to the teacher fraternity or academics in India. And I think there is a huge responsibility on me and my institute to take it further and to make it pan-India for everyone. India is seeing a tremendous growth in tourism, and it has on different levels, right from very niche, micro niche called rural tourism, up to a very mass tourism or even the luxury tourism. So tourism is everywhere, and there is an enthusiasm across people to join it, because it is, as said by the special representative, that it is the engine of economic growth for any country. So when we did this focus group, all the knowledge which we have accumulated during our Austria workshop, that helped us, and Joyatri ma'am led it very, very intelligently. I was able to do this activity with students across 4 universities in India, not only from my institute. And after hearing to Jessica, as well as after hearing to Ray, I can say that more or less the responses of students were similar. And if I have to make it very brief, I can say there are 4 keywords which my students have shown keen interest when we introduce this core competency framework. The first is aware. This was first time when an academician was coming out and talking to them about such type of problem which tourism creates, and tourist creates, and community and even the professionals who are working, they have to face. So they were very eager and happy to participate. They have a lot of enthusiasm, and they wanted to know more. Not only that, such situations are there. Maybe, as Ray has said, some of them already has such experiences, but they were more eager to become aware how they can handle it, and what are their responsibilities, and they can the first one to raise an alarm and to do something very positively to save such a situation. So they wanted to know more, and I think the module 1, 2, 3 is very well focused on this area, where we are introducing different aspects of this particular issue, their roles, what they should do, and again, but all background knowledge they should have. It should not become very overwhelming, as again the special representative has said. The second word is action. So they wanted to know what we can do, how we can react, and how at the same time we can save ourselves. And they wanted to know that maybe it can backfire on them. So here, the module 4 and 5, they are very well drafted to tell what are the different roles, responsibilities, do's and don'ts, at what up to what level they need to be involved into it, and what are their different do's and don'ts which they need to follow. And they were very eager to understand different aspects of law in relation to child in India. As very well said by Ray, that this term we need to contextualize and we need to localize this. The third important reaction which come up was they want to make it foundation. They want that they should be the mindset. They should not be a single one credit course or a short-term course which they do and they move on. They wanted that since first day when they join this degree, either as an undergrad or a master student, or even they are doing a very small course, this should be part of the sustainable development goals from the very first day, because this is on ground problem and they have a role into it. They can do something. So they said again, like Jessica said and Ray said, that we need to understand more. We need to talk more about it. There should be role plays. There should be certain case studies, and there should be simulation where we can understand what we need to do when we confront such situations. And even during their internships, during their training, during their field trips, there should be simulation to them before they enter into such a practical situation. And the fourth, which I must say that it is very important for a big country in India, in which we say that we have different India within India, and where hierarchy and silence is very dominating at a place. They said that we want to make it institutionalized, and it should be also on the business side. So if I am raising an alarm but my business is not supporting me, then it can be a problem for me. So they said that it is very important that we have our own local best practices. We have our own local case studies. We should know the law of the land. We should have different type of sessions with the legal angle. We should have the sessions with practitioners or the experts, like we have right now on panel different experts. So across the globe as well as from India, what is happening and how within India we can work towards it. That was a very key insight which they have given to me. And after listening to them, it became very clear to me that this core competency framework is, of course, one of the guiding document which will be helping all the academician in India. But a lot of homework has to be done by us. We have to first make ourselves more aware, become an expert into it, should understand the nuances, should even understand up to what level and how we have to introduce this, so that we are able to create an impact, because students are not eager to learn, they're eager to lead. At the same time, they need support from us. So I must thank for ECPAT and the team for giving me this opportunity to learn more about this important topic. And I'm sure that when we do our work and when we give a right support to our students, tourism industry will not only serve, but will also protect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aditi, and thank all of you for actually giving us this opportunity to engage with students, thanks to your direct engagement with them and listen to their voices. So we can actually make it relevant for them. So as you said, like all of you, the students are eager, they're grasping it, they want to make a difference, they want to act. But one of the big questions, and I will now move to the last panel, is how do we actually upscale these core competencies, and how do we ensure that it's used, that it's incorporated in the curricula of the institutions? So we have with us Ellen Chao Ling Yang, who is a senior lecturer from Griffith University in Australia. We have Joya Tree, who is development expert and child protection specialist from India, and Julian Nunge, who is past president of International Vocational Education and Training Association and the current CEO of Varnabo Worldwide Education Group. So we ask you, because you are working on the topics of sustainability and also engage in vocational education, if you could reflect, how do you see that this framework can be upscaled to engage educational and tourism organizations and institutions to prepare future professionals to build sustainable tourism with child protection at the core? So I will hand over now to Ellen to bring your reflections.
Thank you, Gabriela. So I am speaking from the perspective of a tourism educator who has a keen interest in the topic but have not fully incorporated child protection content in my teaching. Apart from, putting in a few slides of the issues on child expectations in the CSR and tourism ethics module. So I think, Gabriela, in your questions, you did mention about sustainable tourism, and sustainability is a central theme in most tourism curricula across the globe. But as other speakers have already mentioned, there can be no sustainability without considering the needs of the next generation, because that's the whole idea of sustainability, to be sustainable. And that includes protecting children from harm and safeguarding their rights and well-being. But if I to reflect on most of the practices in tourism education and research, we can see that the voices of children remain largely absent. So I think to answer your questions, ideally, it will be great if we can see more dedicated courses and modules on child protections within tourism programs. But I think, as Ray has already alluded to, we also have to recognize and acknowledge the institutional constraints that many universities and education providers are facing, especially in the current operating environments, where we have limited resources, competing priorities, and the need to meet accreditation requirements. So I think this is where the core competency framework becomes incredibly valuable, because the way I see it is that it offers a scalable and adaptable tool that educators and institutions can adopt in stages. We don't have to adopt everything, cover all 7 competencies in one go. So if we see in that light, it actually empowers individual educators and institutions to begin integrating child protections into existing courses, even without a full standalone subject. So if we look around the virtual meeting room today, we have heard and seen inspiring examples and educators who are already doing important work in this space. What this framework offers is a clear, holistic guide that makes it more accessible to many more educators like myself, who are aware of the issues and eager to address it, but uncertain where to begin. I think for many, both educators and students, this topic feels taboo and difficult to broach. I think this framework helps us to move past that initial discomfort, because it allows us to move beyond awareness raising. It helps us to identify what are the key skills, attitudes, and knowledge that we need to impart in our students, who are the future tourism professionals and leaders, in order to confidently respond to incidents of violence against children and proactively identify and mitigate risks in their workplaces if they are in a managerial roles. So I think drawing on the framework and the extensive resources it links to, educators can build their own knowledge and design learning materials and activities, whether it is those more experiential activities, role play, big need storytelling, etc., that are responsive or relevant to their local context. I think this can support the cultivations of core competencies within existing subjects and across programs. So, like I say, I'm a tourism educator. From my experience going through the workshop in Vienna, participating in a roundtable, and also reading the draft and now the final version of this core competency framework, is that I felt enabled and empowered by this framework. It has given me the tools and confidence to embed child protection content more meaningfully into my own teaching. And I think that is an exciting starting point. Now, looking ahead, the way I see it, there are several pathways to integrate child protection more systematically into tourism educations. One way is through curriculum mapping. It's something like mainstreaming the core competencies across various courses. And I think Ray has somewhat suggested that as well. So, for example, a foundation year 1 course can introduce key terminology and concepts around the topic, while an advanced risk management or operation course can focus on assessing and mitigating risks. And an internship course can then equip students with the practical tools and response strategies to apply during their placements. Another promising pathway that I see is that I think this core competency framework can guide the development of a global online course covering the universal dimensions of child protections and making it available to all education providers. Educators can then build on this with locally relevant cases, legal frameworks, and reporting mechanisms. This way, it not only addresses the institutional constraints that we talked about earlier, but also aligns with the current trends in how students learn and is increasingly in a blended environment as well. I think it honors both the global nature of child expectations and the importance of a locally grounded response. So to sum it up, I think the framework offers a practical and flexible starting point for educators and institutions to gradually embed child protections into tourism educations. And by integrating these core competencies, we are not only equipping students with the knowledge, skill, attitudes they need, we are also shaping a tourism workforce that recognizes the importance of safeguarding children as a part of building a truly sustainable future for the industry. Thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing contribution, Ellen, and I'm so happy to hear that it's a useful tool that gives confidence, and importantly, also it breaks a taboo to speak on this topic. And there are constraints, but it's a really, as you're saying, we're glad to hear that it's a good starting point. So with this, I'll hand over to Joyatri.
Thank you, Gabriela, and I must start by congratulating ECPAT and all the other members who were part of this process and to bring in this very constructive framework, which gives a systematic approach to integrating child protection concerns and the kind of action that the tourism professionals can take. I just wanted to step back a little bit and see that what is the scenario right now in terms of tourism development in India. And I go with Aditi saying that, yes, it is blooming, but the thing is also that India or in South Asia, if you look at the Asia continent that way, you will see that we have a huge number of informal workers, those who are part of the tourism service change. So if I look at this particular core competency framework and I talk about how do we integrate it, I think there are two definite ways of integration. One is with the formal tourism sector, which is in the sense that we have this IHM, which is called as Indian Hotel Management Institutes. There is ITTM, which is also a very professional tourism teaching institutes. So these institutes can have formal professionals taking up this issue to work with, and they do have. And if you remember what we were talking about in terms of the when we met at the Vienna workshop, we were talking about saying that some of them are already looking at it now, because the sustainability concept has actually broadened. It is no longer looking at only in terms of an economic part of it, but they're also looking at what is the social cost of it. And after COVID, things have changed, so people are willing to look at it. Though it is not part of a curriculum yet, but we see that there's an intake of bringing child protection as part of the larger sustainability purview and understanding what does it really mean to the tourism industry if today's tourism professionals are not really being aware of it and also know what to do with it. So so that is one part of it. Then we also have smaller tourism institutes. Those one may not be IITTMs or IHMs, but those are basically they train people or students from the low economic background to be in the tourism space. There, the core competency framework as is may not work, but we can take this and make it customized to the need of those students, because they will also be part of the larger tourism industry, larger tourism experience. So we cannot leave them from this whole process of tourism education that we are working on. If you leave that, because if you look at in the context of India, almost 70% of our entire tourism chain is actually informal. So if we leave them, then we leave a huge number of tourism professionals, quote unquote. So we would really look at this core competency to how do we integrate this core competency framework within the informal sector as well. So what we have, so how do we do that? We work with various tourism boards. Tourism boards in our country are part of the Department of Tourism, Government of India. They have tourism boards, which do most of the time, they are the project implementers on behalf of the government. And they are the ones who also do skill training. If you look at Madhya Pradesh, if you look at Kerala, if you look at different states, they are training they're training people from the mid-economic background, from the low economic background on tourism services to be tourism professionals. So we integrate this framework into their curriculum of skill building. So one is a professional skill building with the kind of institution we already have. One is with the tourism boards, which already have this curriculum. How do we bring that into there? Third is the schools, as part of the national education policy, most of the schools now have a tourism club. How do we bring that in there? because some of these children also be part of the tourism service chain. So how do we bring this curriculum into that perspective? So I really see a wide range of customization that can happen through this base book, that's through the base framework that we already have, to suit the need of various countries. And I already see three very big entry points for my country, India, where we have Aditi to do it with the formal sector, and we have us to do it with the sector which is so-called informal sector. So now, while saying that, I also think that once we have this, we may try to work on the methodology, methodology which suits the particular participant, the particular
Yes.
professionals. That's the only thing that we have to do. It is not really the framework. Framework is a tool, and we are going to use that tool as is.
That's great, exactly, to hear that you are proposing already very practical approaches how we can bring it forward in India, and also thanks to your support in that process.
Thank you. I will end it here just to say that there are many entry points, and I'm very hopeful that it will be adopted in very different ways in our countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joyatri. Thank you for all your support. I'm a little bit conscious now of time because we have a few more interventions. I will hand over now to Julianne. Hey, Julianne, are you with us? Can you unmute yourself? You're on
Okay,
mute.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, yes, now we can. Perfect.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be amongst this august group of collaborators once again, and also to be with so many people from around the world. As all my fellow presenters so far have said, this is not a really easy topic to broach, whether it's for schools or for industries. And students might be easy to convince, but once they go to work, they will find a very different reality where their experience in work will not meet the expectations set for them while they were studying. So I'd like to take a step back and talk from a different perspective. I'd like to talk about the world of work and talk about sustainability, because we know we cannot do it in one sector alone without involving others. So it's all very well for us to talk about education in a school setting, but what happens in the world of work? And I believe we have to collaborate with businesses to change, first of all, management mindsets about this issue, because they are the ones that set the policies and the work practices in their respective industries. And then after that, we have to work on changing staff mindsets and work on training them. And I think this framework is a fantastic way to go about doing that, because it breaks everything down into simpler language and into bite-sized ways of presenting information. But I think really, if you want to get businesses on board, you have to make a business case for it, which means that you have to show them the money side of things. That's as simple as it is. I know it sounds crude, but that's how businesses operate. And the fact is, most tourism and travel professionals belong to some association or organization of some sort, right? They all have codes of conduct. So why don't we work with these associations and bodies to try and expand the code of conducts to definitely include child protection? And then we build capacity indirectly by saying to these organizations, really, all your members have to know the effects of not protecting children, and therefore this should translate into their sphere of work. So when they go out, and if they have to source hotels or they have to source tourist operators, etc., then they are going to look for people that they know are not are fully going to protect children. So then again, the business case of this is also to convince businesses that who are afraid of increased costs by changing their policies and processes or staff training, how they could actually mitigate some of those things. And this is where the educational institutions come in, because while you're training your students, you can also create very simple micro-credentials for businesses, which can also translate to workshops. Because how many businesses can afford to send their staff away for long periods of training without impacting their bottom line? It's not going to work. If you tell them, look, send them on a diploma course, I'm sorry, you'll lose them. But if they can spend maybe 2 hours or half a day on a micro-credential type of training, then that's going to work for them, because they'll see them, it'll tick their CSR boxes, it'll tick other things. And maybe then industry can come together to create a form of certification or accreditation using this framework. It can also be tiered depending on how you want to do it, but maybe that's a step too far at this initial stage, because I believe you have to get the collective mindset to be for this before you can propose such wide-ranging changes. You could also, with your students and various industry professionals, create a mentorship program or an ambassador program, so that you could look at child protection champions who advocate for best practices. I don't know, these are some ideas, but I think really you can't just do things in the school and then expect them to go out, and then the industry is vastly different, because industry works on bottom lines. So in terms of that, then also we could look at international collaboration, where we could establish regional and transnational partnerships between different organizations. You already have the UN WTO, WTTC, PATA, and so many other ones. Well, why don't we work with them to mandate child protection in all their policies? So it's not just an afterthought, it's not just something nice to have, but mandate it. Make it, a key tenet of membership, of participation, and that sort of stuff. And then alongside that, we can do what ACPAT has been doing wonderfully, which is to organize international conferences and workshops with child protection as a standard discussion point.
Thank you so much, Julian. You wanted to add something?
No, that's it. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you so much for linking it with the world of work, and indeed with number of the partners that you mentioned, we are cooperating, and also with that core, and we can strengthen this work, and this core competencies framework can actually shape students who will enter the market, and they will build businesses that already incorporate this topic. But it's extremely important that we link this work already to the business world. So I will like also to recognize here the participation and contribution from many other partners who help to shape this core competencies framework. We have very little time left until the end of this webinar, but here with us are Ginter, Elisa, Madan, and Celine, who are also ready to help with answering any questions that we may have. We just have a few minutes. Well, we have more or less 10 minutes left before I will also ask Guillaume and Manus to give the final remarks, reflecting on what everybody of you contributed. But I will maybe open it to one or two questions if there are any, and if not, welcome brief reflections from the partners who are joining us. And there are others with us who are also online, although not directly in this panel. I don't know, Celine, Madan, Elisa, or Ginter, would you like to give some final reflections from your side, brief ones? And we also have, actually we have a question. Frankie, I will allow you to talk. Oh no, the hand is not raised now anymore. I guess that was not a question. No, okay. Should I allow you to talk? It looks like the hand is up, so I will allow you to talk now. Yeah, you can intervene and ask your question. Okay, we cannot hear. No, we cannot hear. Well, Ginter, Lisa, and Madans, or Celine, would you like to add anything?
If I may, Gabriela, can you hear
Yes,
me?
please.
I'm Elisa. So thank you very much. I'm here representing Europe Research. And one of the things that we discussed in Vienna, and by the way, thanks, a big thanks to ECPAT and all the colleagues for this great job done, is that research should be tied to this education and sensitivization initiative. It's true that not everybody will become experts of this matter, but it's also true, as we saw also in some recent conferences, that we need to get data, analyze them, and also show why those data are alarming and what people can do. So tying research and education initiatives, I think, is one of the keys. And I think this easy scheme with 7 competencies and the 3 categories is very apt for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elisa. And there is a question from the US, from Frankie. So maybe I'll open it to the panelists here. They are advocating as young people with the representatives, elected representatives. And one thing they are asking is whether you think this core competencies framework could be used as an advocacy tool to incorporate child protection. Yeah, do we have one of you who would like to take on this question? Would you feel comfortable?
Gabrielle?
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, I think it could be incorporated very much into some aspects of the competency, around communication, collaboration, particularly in terms of collaborating. I think collaboration is at competency 7, preventing and responding to. It could be working with NGO groups. I've done something similar in the UK with the Shiva Foundation, which, as part of their training, just to raise awareness, it also looks at how we can promote the idea, the concept of prevention and protection early on, and not just simply using words like protection, prevention, but putting it within raising awareness of tourists, of what happens, within destinations, raising awareness of the impacts of poverty, of where children may be in vulnerable situations, and things of that nature. So I think it could be an advocacy tool, or it could be a specific element within that collaborative framework, or promoting collaboration, because there are many NGOs out there that do look to use advocacy, diplomacy, things of those nature to achieve their aims. So there is opportunity there, I think, to raise awareness amongst students of that.
Perfect. And I think we'll be all working together on that. I'll hand over to Celine for the last comment, and then we'll be closing and wrapping up.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriela. Yeah, my experience is the same. The theme appeals very much to young people because it concerns their peers, and especially when you have participation projects or assignments, that they really feel like they are participating in combating the issue. You really make future child protection ambassadors. And when they start working in the field, they will make a noise for this topic, and some of them will be future managers. So I think it's really important to start with these future professionals. Thank you so much for this great initiative, ECPAT International.
Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. With that, I will now hand over to Manus to wrap up this discussion.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. I echo the thanks to ECPAT for organizing this event. Very, very briefly, just some reflections on the very rich discussion. One point that came out strongly is the need to be systematic. We have many committed champions on this call, but how to make it something that is across the board, and what hooks do we need to use around sustainability, around corporate social responsibility, whatever works in your context or country. The second is that there's very clearly an added value and lessons on what is effective in this kind of training. We heard about the experiential approach and the feedback from students. The third is the need for, of course, to adapt it. It has to be context specific, bearing in mind formal, informal sectors, a management or operational lens, also the idea of mindset at a higher level of culture versus also what's happening and making it practical with questions like, whom do you call when there's an issue? So really bringing it down to the very practical. Engagement is another point that came out from the discussion. I found the need to include survivor voices and also the importance of the involvement of children and young people themselves as the ultimate beneficiaries of this work is important. And just finally to say that I fully echo the comments made about the need for partnerships that are effective, whether it's WTTC, other industry bodies or configurations, that just to go back to the point that I started with around the ecosystem and seeing also where this sits in that context. So I'll leave it there and thank you very much again.
Thank you so much, Manus, and Guillaume, over to you for the last words for the way forward.
I had planned a 60-minute speech, but I'll keep it shorter then because we're already over time. But just kidding a little bit. It was very interesting, Professor Nolan, with the students when you came forward saying, it's not an academic subject. This is about real people being harmed and being asked, what can we do about it? And that's the link of wanting to professionalize the sector and being smart about it and configuring a reference point for people to harmonize approach, contextualize it is important. But at the same time, the storytelling, the way you can actually transmit those skills is critical. And that is the next step, right? Because in themselves, the core competences is just a mean, it's not an end. But it's fantastic to see the engagement that this group already bring forward and thinking about all the other countries and tourism academies that could be also part of this change. So that's where it's becoming even more exciting, and to count on your leadership in the sector, your championing of approaches that are different between countries and institutions, but nevertheless super exciting, is something that we're thrilled to continue to see and even perhaps collaborate in the way forward. So let's make this just the start of something rather than the end. So thank you so much for all your input. It's been formidable to do this part with you, and let's see how we go with the next steps further to bring it even more to the practical level. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Gabriela, for leading this excellent sort of initiative. So it's been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you, everybody. With this, as Guillaume said, it's not the end, and we continue working together and with even more people on board. So thank you all, and we are closing this webinar now.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.